When did your school go on a manhunt to go to Disney World? Principal Raymond announced over the intercom. Whoever can identify the serial pooper would receive a ticket to Disney World, but it must be done by Friday. The whole class erupted in whispers and laughter. We'd all heard about the pooper's incidents, but nobody thought the principal would offer such a huge reward. The first incident happened in the boys' locker room shower. Then someone found feces behind the stage curtain in the auditorium. My best friend Walt leaned over with wide eyes. Dude, we need to catch this psycho. I've never been to Disney World. Our homeroom teacher, Mr. McBride, cleared his throat loudly. All right, everyone, settle down. This is a serious health hazard, not entertainment. But nobody was listening. Everyone was already forming investigation groups and making suspect lists. The usual troublemakers were obvious targets, but Wendell was suspended during the second incident. Shauna had been at a volleyball tournament during the art room situation. The mystery deepened. By lunch, the theories were wild. Taylor suggested it might be a staff member, which made everyone laugh. Who would risk their job for something so disgusting and stupid? The fourth incident happened that same day during fifth period. Someone discovered fresh feces in the music room storage area where band instruments were kept. The smell was so bad that several students ran out gagging. This time there was evidence, though. A hall pass from Mr. McBride's class was found near the scene. Walt grabbed my arm after school. We need to check who left McBride's class during fifth period. We made a list and started eliminating suspects. Susan had gone to the nurse with cramps. Noah was at the library with the librarian confirming his alibi. That left 3 possibilities, but none of them seemed like the type. We were missing something. Over the next few days, we shadowed our suspects between classes. We checked bathroom logs and compared schedules. Nothing seemed suspicious until Walt noticed something odd during study hall. Hey, look at this, he whispered, showing me his notes. Every incident happened during or right after Mr. McBride's prep period. It had to be coincidence. Mr. McBride was the strictest teacher in school. He wore pressed shirts every day and gave detention for untucked uniforms. The idea of him being the pooper was ridiculous, but we wrote it down anyway. The fifth incident changed everything. Someone defecated in the teacher's lounge coffee pot. Principal Raymond's voice over the intercom was furious. This has gone too far. The Disney World reward now includes round-trip airfare. Find this person immediately. The whole school became obsessed. Parents complained at meetings. Everyone had theories, but no proof. Walt and I mapped out each incident location looking for patterns. They were scattered across the building, but all near supply closets that held industrial cleaning supplies. Only staff had keys to those closets. We exchanged nervous looks as the pieces started fitting together. We need to watch McBride during his next prep period, I said. Walt nodded. We got hall passes from different teachers and positioned ourselves where we could watch Mr. McBride's door. 20 minutes into his prep period, he emerged looking around nervously. He walked quickly toward the English wing carrying his coffee mug, which seemed weird. We followed at a distance, trying to look casual. He entered the bathroom and stayed for an unusually long time. When he came out, his coffee mug was gone. He walked briskly back to his classroom without noticing us. 15 minutes later, the fire alarm went off. Someone had found feces in the English department supply closet. During the evacuation, Walt and I made eye contact. The next morning, we arrived early and searched around Mr. McBride's classroom. Behind his filing cabinet, we found a box of rubber gloves and industrial toilet paper, the same kind from every crime scene. We took photos with Walt's phone, but still needed to catch him in the act. During Mr. McBride's prep period, we hid in the janitor's closet across from the bathroom. We left the door cracked just enough to see out. Sure enough, he appeared right on schedule, carrying his coffee mug and looking paranoid. This is it, Walt whispered. Mr. McBride entered the bathroom and we heard the lock click. 10 minutes passed before he emerged. His hands were freshly washed, but we could smell the distinct odor following him. He practically ran back to his classroom. We waited 5 minutes, then checked the bathroom. Behind the toilet was a paper bag that hadn't been there before. The smell confirmed everything. We ran to Principal Raymond's office with our evidence. You're accusing Mr. McBride? She said, looking skeptical. He's been here 15 years. But the photos and timeline were convincing. She called security to check the bathroom while keeping Mr. McBride in his classroom. When security confirmed finding the bag, everything happened fast. Police arrived and escorted Mr. McBride out in handcuffs. The whole school watched from windows as our English teacher was arrested. In his classroom, they found detailed notes about each incident and plans for future locations. He'd been planting evidence to frame students. Principal Raymond called us to her office that afternoon. She handed us the Disney World ticket, but her face was troubled. Boys, there's something else. The psychologist evaluated Mr. McBride and found something disturbing in his apartment. She paused like she didn't want to continue. What did they find? Walt asked. Jars. Dozens of them in his refrigerator. All labeled with dates and locations. But here's what scares me. The labels go back 3 years and include addresses that aren't just from our school. My hands started shaking as I looked down at the Disney ticket. Walt's face went pale next to me. Principal Raymond pulled out a folder and showed us photos the police had taken. Each jar had a white label with neat handwriting showing dates and school names going back to when we were in 4th grade. Franklin Middle School appeared 12 times. Jefferson Elementary showed up 8 times. Our school had 23 entries. The room felt too hot and my shirt stuck to my back with sweat. Walt grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. Principal Raymond told us the police were checking those other schools for similar incidents now. She said we'd done the right thing, but needed to get back to class while they figured out what to do next. We walked out of her office into the hallway where everyone was already talking about Mr. McBride getting arrested. Kids had their phones out recording each other's reactions. Some were laughing like it was the funniest thing ever. Others looked scared and kept asking if he'd really done it. Noah ran up to us asking for details, but we just kept walking. The news had spread faster than any rumor I'd ever seen at the school. By the time we got to our lockers, 3 different groups had asked us what happened. Walt kept saying we couldn't talk about it. The final bell rang, but instead of the usual rush to leave, everyone moved slowly through the halls. Principal Raymond's voice came over the intercom telling us all after-school activities were canceled. She said everyone needed to go straight home while the administration worked with police. Parents were already showing up in the parking lot looking confused and angry. That evening I was doing homework when the phone rang. My mom answered and I heard her say Principal Raymond's name. She handed me the phone, and the principal explained we'd need to meet with a detective tomorrow morning. She said our parents should come too, and we'd need to give official statements about our investigation. Walt's family would be there at the same time. After I hung up, Walt started texting me about booking the Disney trip for spring break. He sent links to hotels and flight prices. I couldn't even look at them. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing those jar labels with all those dates. 3 years of this sick stuff. How could someone do that for 3 years? Walt kept texting, asking why I wasn't excited about winning. The next morning, my parents drove me to the school early. Walt and his parents were already in the conference room when we arrived. Detective Kira Campos stood up and shook everyone's hands. She had a badge on her belt and a notebook full of papers. She explained that our evidence had been really important, but we needed to stop investigating right away. This was a criminal case now, and only trained professionals should handle it. She asked us to tell her everything from the beginning. Walt and I took turns explaining how we'd noticed the pattern with Mr. McBride's prep periods. The detective wrote down every detail we mentioned. She asked specific questions about exact times and dates. When did we take the photos? What time did we see him enter the bathroom? How long did he stay inside? She wanted to know if we'd touched any evidence or moved anything. We told her we'd only taken pictures and hadn't disturbed the scenes. She emphasized that we might have to testify in court later. She said we absolutely couldn't post about this on social media or talk to reporters. Any public statements could hurt the case against Mr. McBride. Our parents nodded and promised to monitor our online activity. After the detective finished with us, Dean Morris knocked and came in. He was the head counselor and looked really serious. He handed our parents consent forms for counseling services. He explained that discovering something this disturbing could affect us in ways we might not expect right away. He said some kids who witness crimes have trouble sleeping or concentrating in class. He wanted to make sure we had support if we needed it. My mom signed the forms immediately. Walking to first period felt completely different from any other day. Some kids looked at us like we were heroes who'd solved the mystery. Others whispered behind their hands and I heard someone call us snitches. A group of boys made disgusting jokes about the whole thing. I wanted to disappear into my locker. Walt tried to act normal, but I could tell he was uncomfortable too. When we got to English class, a woman we'd never seen before stood at the front. She introduced herself as Miss Bianca Rodriguez, our substitute teacher. The room felt wrong without Mr. McBride's strict presence. Kids were talking and nobody was in their assigned seats. Miss Rodriguez tried to get everyone's attention, but her voice was too quiet. She asked us to open our books, but half the class was still discussing the arrest. Someone asked her if she knew what Mr. McBride had done. Her face turned red and she said we needed to focus on today's lesson. Nobody was listening though. The whole atmosphere was strange and tense. Kids kept looking at the empty teacher's desk where Mr. McBride used to sit with his coffee mug. Mr. Rodriguez struggled through the lesson while everyone whispered and passed notes. This was going to be a long rest of the school year. 3 news vans were parked outside with reporters trying to get students to talk about what happened. Eddie Barker from Channel 7 kept shoving his microphone at kids while the security guard tried to push them back toward the parking lot. Walt wanted to go talk to them, but I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward my mom's car. The next morning, between first and second period, our history teacher pulled us into her empty classroom. She closed the door and checked the hallway before turning to us. "Thank you for speaking up," she said quietly. "I had suspicions, but never enough proof." She looked really nervous and asked us not to tell anyone she'd said that. At lunch, this kid Jeremy, who always sat in the front row of McBride's class, came up to our table. His face was all red and he slammed his tray down so hard that milk splashed everywhere. "You ruined a good teacher's life over some stupid prank," he yelled loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. Walt started trying to explain about the jars and the other schools, but I just picked up my tray and walked away. I was too tired to fight about it. After school, Walt texted me a screenshot of his Instagram. He'd posted a photo of our investigation board with all the notes and timelines we'd made. The caption said, "We caught him," with a detective emoji. My stomach dropped when I saw it already had 300 likes and was shared in our town's Facebook groups. Everyone was commenting and tagging their friends. Some people called us heroes, while others said we were snitches who should mind our own business. My phone started blowing up with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. That evening while I was doing homework, Detective Campos called our house phone. Her voice was really serious, and she asked to speak to both me and my parents. She explained that Walt's post could contaminate the jury pool and make it harder to prosecute McBride. "You need to take down all posts immediately," she said firmly. "Any public statements about evidence could hurt the case." My dad made me delete everything from my phone even though I hadn't posted anything. 2 days later, we got a letter from the school district saying Craig Peterson was scheduling a town hall meeting for concerned parents. The auditorium was completely packed that night with angry parents demanding answers. Some were yelling at Principal Raymond about how this could happen for 3 years without anyone noticing. Others wanted to know what the school was doing to keep kids safe. Craig Peterson stood at the podium trying to calm everyone down, but people kept shouting over him. The next week during chemistry class, this girl mentioned how bad the smell was during one of the incidents. Just hearing about it made my chest feel tight, and I couldn't catch my breath. The room started spinning, and I ran to the bathroom where I locked myself in a stall. My hands were shaking, and I was sweating through my shirt. I sat on the floor for 10 minutes trying to breathe normally, but it felt like I was drowning. The nurse called Dean Morris, who found me still sitting on the bathroom floor. He helped me stand up and walked me to his office. "You're having a panic attack," he said calmly. He taught me this thing where I had to name 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear, 2 things I could smell, and 1 thing I could taste. We practiced it together until my breathing went back to normal, and I felt steady enough to go back to class. He wrote me a pass and told me I could come to his office anytime I felt that way again. 3 nights later was the town hall meeting. The auditorium was even more crowded than before, with people standing in the aisles. When they opened the floor for questions, this woman named Mila Dorsey stood up with a folder in her hand. She said she'd talked to several janitors who'd complained about finding suspicious messes over the years, but were told it was probably just students playing pranks. The whole crowd erupted with people yelling at Principal Raymond and demanding to know why nobody investigated. Craig Peterson had to use the microphone to get everyone quiet again. He promised they would do a full audit of key access logs going back 5 years and interview all current and former custodial staff. The district failed to connect obvious patterns, he admitted, while Principal Raymond sat behind him, looking like she wanted to disappear. After the meeting, Walt and I were walking to his dad's car when he mentioned this podcast that wanted to interview us about catching McBride. I immediately said no way, but Walt got mad. "Come on, this is our chance to tell our side," he said. I told him absolutely not, and reminded him what Detective Campos said about talking publicly. Walt rolled his eyes and said I was being paranoid. "You only care about being famous," I snapped at him. We didn't talk the whole ride home, and he didn't text me that night like he usually did. It was our first real fight since becoming friends in 3rd grade. The next afternoon, I walked out the back door trying to avoid everyone when Eddie Barker stepped right in front of me with a camera guy and a microphone. Walt was already there somehow, looking excited about the attention while I just wanted to run. Eddie shoved the microphone at us, asking about how we caught Mr. McBride and what evidence we found. I stood there frozen like an idiot, but Walt started talking about our investigation board and how we tracked the prep periods. He mentioned the coffee mug and the supply closets, and even said something about the jars, which made Eddie's eyes get huge. The camera guy kept filming while Walt explained our whole process step by step. I grabbed his arm trying to get him to stop, but he shook me off and kept going. Eddie asked if we thought Mr. McBride was dangerous, and Walt said we were just glad we caught him before things got worse. By the time I pulled Walt away, they had 10 minutes of footage, and Eddie was already running to his news van. That night, my phone blew up with texts from kids at the school saying we were on Channel 7. Walt had given them everything, including details about evidence that Detective Campos specifically told us not to share. My parents saw it too and called Walt's parents immediately. The next morning, Detective Campos showed up at the school with both sets of parents already in the conference room looking serious. She explained that Walt's comments about the evidence could give the defense attorney ammunition to claim the investigation was tainted by publicity. She said defense lawyers look for any reason to get evidence thrown out, and public statements from witnesses were a gift to them. Walt's dad got mad at him for not listening while my mom kept shaking her head. Campos made us both promise again not to do any more interviews and explained that we might have to testify about what Walt said on TV. She left looking frustrated and told us she'd have to inform the prosecutor about this complication. Walking through the halls afterward felt different, because now everyone had seen us on the news talking about the case. Some teachers were whispering near the copy machine and stopped when we walked by. Later, I heard 2 teachers arguing about whether Principal Raymond should have caught this sooner since there were signs. One teacher said Raymond ignored complaints, while another defended her, saying nobody could have predicted this. The divide was getting obvious, with some staff members avoiding Raymond in the halls, while others made a point of supporting her publicly. During lunch, my phone buzzed with an Instagram message from an account with no profile picture. The message said they knew what really happened and claimed I planted evidence to get attention in the Disney trip. They said they had proof and would expose me unless I admitted to lying. My hands were shaking as I took screenshots of everything and immediately forwarded them to Detective Campos. She texted back within an hour saying she'd traced the account and told me not to respond or delete anything. Dean Morris called me to his office that afternoon and helped me change all my privacy settings on social media. He showed me how to block accounts and report harassment to each platform. We went through my phone together and made a list of times when I should just turn it off completely. He said taking breaks from social media was important when dealing with something this stressful. We made a plan where I'd leave my phone in another room during homework and meals. He also gave me a notebook to write down my thoughts instead of posting them online. 2 days later, Craig Peterson sent out a new policy requiring every teacher to log bathroom breaks digitally through a new app. Students had to scan a code when leaving and returning to class. Some kids complained it was an invasion of privacy, but most parents supported it after what happened with Mr. McBride. Teachers had to explain the new system in every class, and some of them seemed annoyed about the extra paperwork. The app tracked everything, including how long students were gone and which bathroom they used. Detective Campos called my parents later that week with an update about Mr. McBride's evaluation. She said the psychologist found evidence of a compulsive disorder that had been getting worse for years. It didn't excuse what he did, but it helped explain why someone would risk their career for something so bizarre. She said he'd been fighting these urges for a long time before giving in, and that he needed serious psychiatric treatment. The evaluation also showed he had elaborate fantasies about getting caught and the attention it would bring. During chemistry class, a girl who'd confronted us the week before came up to my desk. She said she was sorry for blaming us after learning about the other schools and victims from the news. She looked really upset and said she couldn't believe a teacher she trusted for 3 years had been doing this the whole time. She asked if there were warning signs we missed, and I told her nobody could have known. She said she felt stupid for defending him and didn't know who to trust anymore. The teachers' union released a statement that afternoon that got everyone arguing again. They said Mr. McBride deserved due process like any accused person and announced they were providing him with legal representation. Parents were furious at the school board meeting that night, saying union dues shouldn't defend someone who admitted to these crimes. The union representative tried explaining that everyone deserves representation, but people were shouting over him. Some parents demanded the union drop Mr. McBride's case, while others said that would set a dangerous precedent. That weekend, a podcast producer emailed both Walt and me offering $500 each for an exclusive interview about the case. I deleted it immediately and texted Walt not to even think about it. This time he agreed we should stay quiet and said he learned his lesson from the news interview disaster. Dean Morris called both Walt and me to his office on Monday morning and had us sit in chairs facing each other while he pulled up a third chair between us. He asked us each to write down 3 things that scared us about the whole situation without talking, then had us trade papers and read what the other wrote. Walt's list said he was scared of losing me as a friend, scared nobody would care about him after this was over, and scared of having to testify in court. My list said I was scared of the panic attacks getting worse, scared of people always seeing me as just the kid who caught McBride, and scared that Walt didn't understand why I needed space from all the attention. Dean made us look at each other while he explained that we were both handling trauma in different ways, and neither way was wrong. Walt admitted he'd been chasing interviews because for the first time in his life, people actually wanted to hear what he had to say. I told him I understood, but that every time I saw our names in the news, my chest got tight and I couldn't breathe right. We agreed that from now on we'd check with each other before talking to anyone about the case, and that Walt would handle any necessary public stuff while I stayed in the background. Craig Peterson showed up at the school the next day and pulled the entire student government into the library for a meeting that lasted through lunch. He had them make lists of every time they'd noticed something weird or concerning but didn't report it, then asked what would have made them feel safe enough to speak up. The list they created was long and included things like anonymous reporting systems, regular check-ins with trusted adults who weren't teachers, and clear protocols for what happens after a report gets made. Craig took notes on his laptop the whole time and said their ideas would become the foundation for new district-wide policies that would roll out next semester. On Wednesday, Detective Campos met with us in the conference room again and explained that the district attorney had scheduled McBride's preliminary hearing for 2 weeks from Friday. She showed us a diagram of what the courtroom would look like and pointed to where we'd sit, where McBride would be, and where the judge would preside. She emphasized that we needed to stick to exactly what we saw and heard, not what we thought or guessed or assumed. If the defense attorney asked us something we didn't know, we should just say we didn't know instead of trying to figure it out. She had us practice answering sample questions and corrected us when we started speculating or adding details that weren't facts. Principal Raymond asked to see us privately on Thursday during our study hall period. She looked tired and older than I'd ever seen her, with dark circles under her eyes and her usually perfect hair slightly messy. She said she owed us an apology for turning the investigation into a game with the Disney World reward. She admitted she'd panicked when the incidents kept happening, and parents were threatening to pull their kids from the school. She thought offering a big reward would motivate students to help, but realized too late that she'd made light of something serious and potentially dangerous. She said if she could do it over, she would have brought in professionals immediately, instead of making students do detective work that could have put us at risk. The official notice for McBride's preliminary hearing arrived at our houses on Friday afternoon in thick legal envelopes that required signatures. The court date was set for next Friday at 9 in the morning at the county courthouse downtown. Reading the official language with words like defendant and witness for the prosecution made everything feel more real and serious than it had before. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table, and we went through the whole document together, while my mom took notes about what we needed to do to prepare. Thursday morning was normal until third period, when several kids started crowding around the windows facing the parking lot. A police transport van was pulling up to the loading dock, probably to collect some evidence from McBride's old classroom that they needed for the trial. Through the van's side window, we could see McBride in an orange jumpsuit with his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked thin and pale, nothing like the strict teacher who used to patrol our hallways checking for dress code violations. Even though I knew what he'd done, seeing him like that made my stomach feel weird. Like maybe we'd destroyed a person even if that person had done terrible things. Detective Campos called that afternoon to remind us about the bigger picture of why this mattered. She explained that the goal wasn't just punishment, but making sure McBride got the psychiatric help he clearly needed, while also keeping the community safe from future incidents. She said the justice system tries to balance accountability with rehabilitation, especially when mental health issues are involved. She told us that McBride's lawyer was pushing for a treatment facility instead of regular jail, which made sense given the psychological evaluation results. Dean Morris scheduled one last session with us before court to practice our testimony skills. He had me sit in a chair while Walt pretended to be the defense attorney, asking tricky questions designed to confuse me or make me say something that wasn't true. We practiced saying "I don't know" and "I don't remember" without feeling like we were failing or letting anyone down. Dean taught us to take a breath before answering, to ask for questions to be repeated if we didn't understand them, and to never guess about something we weren't sure about. He said the defense attorney's job was to create doubt, not to attack us personally, even though it might feel that way. Thursday night, someone leaked the district's preliminary report to the local news station, and by Friday morning it was everywhere. The report revealed that there had been warning signs going back 2 years, including complaints from janitors about finding messes that got dismissed as pranks, and at least 3 instances where students reported feeling uncomfortable around McBride but couldn't explain exactly why. Parents were furious at the school board meeting that night, demanding to know why these red flags were ignored and calling for Principal Raymond's resignation, along with 2 board members who had been in charge of oversight. The meeting got so heated that security had to escort several parents out when they started shouting over each other. That evening around 8 o'clock, Walt called my cell phone and his voice sounded different, quieter and more serious than usual. He said he was really sorry for pushing the publicity angle when I was clearly struggling with everything. He admitted that he got caught up in all the attention because he'd never felt important or special before, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk to him and hear his story. He said seeing me have panic attacks and watching our friendship get strained made him realize that being famous for a few weeks wasn't worth losing his best friend or making me miserable. We both agreed that from now on we'd handle everything as a team, checking with each other before making any decisions about the case or talking to anyone about what happened. Saturday morning, Walt came over to my house and we sat at the kitchen table with the Disney tickets between us. Neither of us reached for them, even though we'd worked so hard to get them. My mom made us pancakes while we talked about what felt right to do next. Walt kept pushing his fork around his plate without eating much. He finally said we should wait until after the court stuff was done before going anywhere. Then he suggested something that surprised me about donating some of the reward money to help other kids at the school. We called Principal Raymond that afternoon and told her our idea about giving half the Disney money to start a counseling fund. She got quiet on the phone for a long time before saying that was really mature of us. Monday morning, the court date arrived faster than we expected. Detective Campos picked us up early and drove us to the courthouse downtown. The building was bigger than I thought it would be, with metal detectors at the entrance. We had to wait in a small room with uncomfortable chairs until they called us. When my turn came, I walked into the courtroom and sat in the witness chair. The prosecutor asked me simple questions first about what we saw and when we saw it. I stuck to exactly what Dean taught me and only said what I personally observed. The defense attorney stood up next, and his name was Griffin according to the nameplate on his table. He asked the same questions 5 different ways, trying to confuse me. I just kept repeating the facts calmly without adding anything extra. After 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours, they let me leave the stand. Walt testified next while I waited outside with my parents. Griffin spent most of his time arguing that McBride was sick and needed help, not jail. He showed papers from 3 different doctors saying McBride had mental problems that made him do these things. The judge listened carefully and wrote lots of notes while Griffin talked. When we left the courthouse, there were 2 groups of people with signs on opposite sides of the steps. One group held signs saying McBride needed treatment and understanding, not punishment. The other group had signs demanding justice for all the victims from multiple schools. Police officers stood between the groups, keeping them separated when voices got loud. Detective Campos walked us to her car quickly without stopping to talk to anyone. She explained in the car that what happens next involves lawyers meeting to work out a deal. She said most cases like this don't actually go to full trial, but end in agreements. The district released their big report 2 days later, with Principal Raymond reading parts at a special assembly. They promised 15 new rules, including cameras in more hallways and better background checks for staff. They also said they were hiring 3 more counselors and upgrading all the locks immediately. Principal Raymond held a meeting with just the teachers first to apologize for missing the warning signs. Then she met with different groups of students throughout the day, answering hard questions. Some kids were still mad, but most seemed to appreciate that she was being honest about mistakes. Walt and I went to the school newspaper office instead of making a big announcement ourselves. We wrote a simple letter about donating half our Disney reward to create a safety fund for students. The paper printed it without our pictures, which is what we wanted to keep things quiet. Dean helped us figure out a good time to actually take our trip without missing important school stuff. He suggested going in late spring when the parks weren't so crowded with families. We picked a long weekend in May and decided to bring our parents instead of going alone. My mom booked the flights for early morning so we'd have more time at the parks. For the first time in over a month, kids stopped staring at us in the hallways. People started talking about normal stuff again, like upcoming tests and who was dating who. Teachers stopped giving us those worried looks every time we walked into class. Even lunch felt regular again, with everyone complaining about the cafeteria food instead of discussing the case. Walt and I still met with Dean once a week, but it was getting easier to talk about everything. The panic attacks stopped happening, and I could walk past McBride's old classroom without feeling sick. Other kids were moving on too, and some even made jokes about the whole thing, which felt weird but normal. The substitute teacher was doing okay, and kids mostly behaved for her without McBride's strict rules. She let us work in groups and play music quietly, which McBride never would have allowed. Some parents still complained at the school board meetings, but not as many as before. The new security cameras went up over spring break, along with the new locks on every door. It cost the district a lot of money, but nobody argued it wasn't worth it for safety. We had practice drills for the new procedures, which felt excessive, but made some people feel better. By April, everything at the school felt almost completely back to normal, with regular problems and regular days. 3 weeks later, Detective Campos called during dinner to tell us the lawyers had worked out a deal for McBride. She explained he'd get 2 years at a mental health place plus 10 years where someone would watch him after that. My parents nodded while I pushed food around my plate, thinking about how weird it was that everything was getting wrapped up with paperwork and meetings instead of some big trial. Walt texted me right after asking if I'd heard the news, and I told him yeah, it seemed fair enough since McBride was clearly messed up in the head, but still did awful stuff to people. That weekend, maintenance crews showed up at the school installing new locks on every supply closet and storage room. They put in these card readers that tracked who went in and when, plus more cameras in the hallways near bathrooms and other places where stuff had happened. Monday morning, everyone could see the changes with the new locks and signs about the security system everywhere. Principal Raymond made Walt and me come to this small ceremony in the library where we handed over a check for half the Disney money to start a fund for more counselors. We told them no pictures and no big announcement, just wanted to help make things better for other kids who might need someone to talk to. The district person wrote a basic thank you note that went in the school newsletter without our names, which was exactly what we wanted. That Saturday, both our families came to my house for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pizza and salad in the backyard. Nobody really talked about the case or what happened, mostly just regular stuff like my dad's work and Walt's sister's soccer team making regionals. It wasn't a party or anything, more like everyone breathing out after holding their breath for months. The next week, Dean told us we'd start meeting just once a month instead of every week since we were doing better with everything. He said we could always come back more if we needed to, but he was proud of how we'd handled such a crazy situation and grown from it. 2 months passed before we finally took the Disney trip over Memorial Day weekend. Our moms booked connecting rooms at a regular hotel near the parks, and we spent 3 days riding rides and eating too much junk food like normal families on vacation. Walt wanted to post pictures, but we'd agreed not to put anything online about it, just kept it between us, and enjoyed the time without all the weight attached to the tickets. Coming back to the school after the trip felt different in a good way when this kid from my history class asked to borrow my notes from the day before. It was such a normal thing that had nothing to do with catching McBride or being those kids who solved the case, just regular school stuff between regular students. At lunch that day, Walt and I sat at our usual table talking about summer plans and which classes we wanted for next year. We argued about whether to take Spanish or French and complained about having to read 3 books over the summer for English class. Other kids around us were having the same conversations about normal teenage stuff, and nobody looked at us different or whispered when we walked by anymore. The whole thing with McBride had taught us that catching bad guys wasn't like movies where everything ends neat and clean. Justice was messy with lawyers and deals and mental hospitals instead of clear good versus evil. But we'd helped make our school safer and stopped someone from hurting more people. Plus, our friendship had survived all the stress and weirdness that came after. That felt like the only ending that really mattered, sitting there eating cafeteria pizza and arguing about foreign language requirements like nothing had ever happened. So yeah, that happened. Pretty wild, honestly. Subscribe if you're into these stories, or don't. Totally your call.